Hey there! Before we jump in, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment to let me know what you think. Alright, let's get started. The winter has settled over Hawthorne, a small town nestled among the rolling hills of western Pennsylvania, with a relentless chill that seemed to seep into the very bones of those who remained. Snow lay heavy on the crooked rooftops and blanketed the narrow, frozen streets, turning the town into a muted expanse of white and gray. The wind howled through the skeletal branches of the blackened oaks and maples, carrying with it whispers that the townsfolk claimed belonged to memories better left undisturbed. At the edge of town, perched on a hill that overlooked the frozen creek below, stood the modest farmhouse of Caleb Whitmore, a widower of 42 winters, whose eyes had long grown accustomed to grief and solitude. The world had taken his wife, Margaret, 2 years prior, leaving him with only the echo of her laughter and the lingering scent of lavender she favored in her hair. Caleb moved through the house with methodical precision, each creak of the floorboards beneath his boots a reminder of the absence that filled every corner. The fire crackled low in the hearth, its warmth insufficient against the chill of the winter night. Each evening, as the clock struck 2, Caleb found himself awakened by a sound that had become more terrifying in its persistence than the mere cold, the unmistakable soft thump of footsteps outside his door, measured and deliberate. The first nights, he had dismissed it as a trick of his mind, the product of sleepless nights and sorrow weighing heavy on his spirit. Yet, as weeks turned to months, the footsteps returned, always at exactly 2:17 a.m., always halting just beyond the threshold of his bedroom. On a particularly bitter night, when the wind clawed at the shutters and the snow whipped against the windows like icy fingers, Caleb could bear it no longer. Drawing his long coat around him, he lit a lantern and stepped into the corridor, his hands trembling despite his efforts to appear composed. His breath clouded the cold air, each exhale a visible testament to the life still clinging stubbornly to him. The footsteps had stopped once more, leaving only silence so thick it pressed against his chest. With a cautious hand, he turned the doorknob. The door creaked open, and the lantern's glow revealed a startling sight: fresh, muddy footprints, leading from the threshold of his home, down the slope of the hill, and disappearing into the darkened woods beyond. His heart caught in his throat as he followed their path, tracing them through the snow until they led him to the old cemetery that lay beyond the town's edge, where Margaret rested beneath a simple white headstone, crowned with frost. The tracks ended at her grave. And yet, Caleb's breath hitched in disbelief as he saw that they were bare feet, mud smeared across pale skin, as though someone, or something, had walked through the thawing winter earth to reach her. He fell to his knees beside the grave, the lantern casting flickering shadows over the familiar carvings of her name. "Margaret," he whispered, his voice trembling between longing and fear, "it's been so long." The wind seemed to answer him, carrying a soft rustle that sounded like her voice, faint and beckoning. Against every rational thought, against every ounce of grief he had suffered, Caleb felt compelled to follow those footprints wherever they might lead, as though the earth itself had conspired to return her to him, even in the shadows of death. With a heart full of terror and longing, he stepped into the woods, each footfall a soft echo of hers, and felt the world shift around him. The snow seemed to part with ease, the darkness less oppressive, replaced by a pale, ethereal glow that illuminated a narrow path lined with gnarled trees. Each step drew him deeper into a landscape that felt suspended between life and the afterlife, a place where time bowed to memory and love defied mortality. Caleb's mind raced with questions that had no answers, his rationality clashing with a desperate hope that perhaps, just perhaps, Margaret's presence was not a phantom but a promise. And then, as the tracks led him to a clearing bathed in an otherworldly light, he saw her. Not as he remembered her lying in the grave, frail and still, but alive, her hair cascading over her shoulders, cheeks flushed with warmth, and eyes that mirrored the same terror and yearning that had driven him to follow her across the snow. Margaret's lips trembled as she whispered his name, and Caleb felt the frozen weight of years melt from his heart. He reached for her, and for a moment, the world held its breath, suspended between sorrow and reunion, between life and something more fragile, more sacred. As he took her hand, bare and trembling, the wind seemed to bow around them, and the footprints in the snow glowed faintly, marking the path of a love that had refused to be extinguished, even by death. They spoke no words, for none were needed. In that moment, the icy grip of grief loosened, replaced by the unspoken understanding that whatever force had summoned him here had also given them a second chance, a chance neither time nor mortality could fully define. And yet, even as their hands intertwined, a shadow lingered at the edge of the clearing, a reminder that love born of death bore its own dangers. Caleb's pulse quickened, but he did not pull away. With a mixture of fear and hope, he stepped forward with Margaret, following the faint glow of the footprints that had brought them together, deeper into the unknown, where the past, present, and future intertwined. Some said the tracks were a trick of the mind, a manifestation of a grief too great to bear. Others whispered that Caleb Whitmore had walked with death and love hand in hand, and that night the two were never seen again. The snow lay heavy over Hawthorne the next morning, pristine and undisturbed, except for a single trail of footprints that began at Caleb's doorstep and led into the darkened woods, bare, muddy, and vanishing into the mysteries of the winter night. Caleb did not hesitate as he and Margaret moved deeper into the woods, following the glowing footprints that seemed almost alive beneath the snow. The trees closed around them, skeletal branches intertwining overhead like fingers, and the pale moonlight spilled in fractured beams, illuminating the path in a dreamlike shimmer. Margaret's hand was cold but firm in his, a tangible reminder that she was real, or at least, more real than the grave had promised. The silence between them was heavy, yet not uncomfortable. It was the silence of shared sorrow, of words that had been left unsaid for years. Caleb stole glances at her, noting the familiar curve of her jaw, the way her hair fell in waves like the river near their old homestead, and the aching memory of mornings spent wrapped in each other's warmth before illness had claimed her. "Caleb," she whispered, her voice almost lost beneath the sighing wind. How is this possible?" Her words faltered, eyes wide with disbelief and fear. "I don't know," he admitted, his own voice trembling. "All I know is that I've missed you, that I couldn't live without seeing you one last time." His chest tightened with a longing he had buried beneath grief and duty. "I thought I'd never see you again, and now you're here." Margaret's lips quivered into a faint smile, bittersweet and haunting. "I was always here, Caleb. Even when they buried me, even when the snow fell and the wind screamed, I waited." Her gaze softened, and a tear traced a line through the frost upon her cheek. "I couldn't leave, not until you came." The woods seemed to shift around them, the shadows stretching and bending as if the very forest recognized their reunion. Snowflakes fell with deliberate grace, melting on their hair and shoulders, and the glow beneath their feet pulsed faintly, leading them further toward a hollow in the forest where the earth rose in gentle mounds. Caleb's heart thudded in his chest as he realized they had reached a place untouched by the frost and decay of the graveyard, an ancient clearing, its center dominated by a gnarled oak whose branches seemed to cradle the sky. Beneath it, the footprints faded, vanishing entirely into a soft patch of untouched snow, leaving them alone in the quiet luminescence of the night. Margaret turned to him, eyes brimming with emotion. "This is where it ends," she said, her voice firm yet fragile. "I cannot stay long. The living and the dead are not meant to linger together." Caleb gripped her hands tightly, desperation flooding him. "I don't care. I don't care what the world says. I will follow you, Margaret, even into the shadows if I must. I cannot, will not, let you slip away again." Her gaze softened, and for the first time, a hint of warmth passed over her pale features. "Caleb, love like ours is not bound by the rules of men or time. But it comes at a cost. Are you ready for that?" He nodded without hesitation, though a shiver ran down his spine. The wind carried whispers that sounded like laughter, soft and knowing, as though the forest itself acknowledged his devotion. "I am ready for anything, as long as it's with you." For a moment, they stood in silence, their breaths mingling in the cold air, hearts beating in unison, and then, almost imperceptibly, the ground beneath the oak seemed to shimmer, revealing a faint pathway of moonlit frost that led into a mist-draped thicket beyond. Caleb felt a pull, a compulsion he could neither resist nor explain, and he followed, Margaret gliding beside him with an ethereal grace that made him ache with longing and awe. They moved as one, footstep following footstep, until the mist thickened and the air grew warmer, perfumed with the scent of wildflowers and earth, incongruous against the snow-laden forest. It was as if they had crossed into a place untouched by winter, a hidden world where time bent to their will and love could exist untainted by loss. Caleb looked at her, astonished. "Where are we?" Margaret's eyes shone with a strange light, equal parts sadness and hope. "Somewhere between the world you know and the one I've lingered in. It is neither life nor death, but a place that allows us to exist together, if only briefly." He swallowed hard, heart clenching. "Briefly. I cannot bear the thought of losing you again." She touched his cheek gently, her fingers lingering against the frost that clung to his skin. "You won't lose me tonight." "Not yet. But understand, even in this place, time is fragile. We must cherish every heartbeat, every glance, every whisper." They walked hand in hand through the luminous clearing, their shadows merging and stretching beneath the moonlight, until they reached a small, frozen pond. The surface shimmered like glass, reflecting the silvered sky above. Margaret knelt by its edge, brushing snow from the ice, revealing a mirror-like surface that seemed to ripple with possibility. "Look, Caleb," she murmured. "This is where we can remember, where we can be together without the world intruding. It is our haven." He knelt beside her, captivated by the reflection of her face, framed by moonlight and snow. "It's beautiful," he whispered, though his voice carried a tremor of sorrow. "But I fear when morning comes, it will vanish." Margaret's smile was both radiant and melancholic. "Then we shall make night our eternity, and every heartbeat our lifetime. Let us promise, Caleb, that even if we must part, our love will endure beyond the world of men, beyond the cold and the grave." Caleb pressed his lips to hers, and the kiss was unlike any other he had known, soft, longing, filled with years of grief and unspoken desire. The warmth of her touch spread through him, melting the chill that had settled in his chest, and for a fleeting moment the forest seemed to sigh in contentment. Time itself appeared to halt, allowing two souls separated by death and fate to exist in an embrace that defied the natural order. Yet even in that stolen eternity, a shadow lingered at the edge of their vision, a subtle reminder that love born of death was never without peril. The footprints that had led Caleb to Margaret pulsed faintly once more, beckoning him, whispering of paths unknown, of choices that could not be undone. And with a mixture of fear and longing, Caleb rose, hands still entwined with hers, and took the first step toward the unknown, ready to follow the footprints, and Margaret, wherever they might lead. As they vanished into the mist, the snow-laden woods fell silent once more, leaving behind only the faintest trace of muddy, bare footprints that seemed to promise that love, even in the face of death, could guide the faithful to the most impossible of reunions. The townsfolk of Hawthorne would later whisper of the Whitmore house, of lights flickering in empty windows, of a man seen walking in the snow who never returned, and a woman's laughter carried faintly on the wind, proof, perhaps, that some loves are too profound, too tragic, to be bound by the grave. The mist thickened as Caleb and Margaret followed the faintly glowing footprints deeper into the forest, a strange quiet settling around them. The trees arched overhead, forming tunnels of shadow and frost, and the moonlight fell in fractured beams that made the snow glitter like shards of glass. Every breath they drew hung in the cold air like a visible thread between them, tethering them to one another in a world that seemed suspended between life and death. Caleb could feel the pull of something ancient here, something that existed beyond the rules of men, a force that had guided him through grief and snow to this impossible reunion. Margaret walked with a grace that made him ache with longing. Her eyes shone like lanterns in the darkness, illuminating both the path and his heart. "Caleb," she murmured, "the footprints, they are more than just a path. They are a summons, a bridge between what was lost and what could be." Her fingers tightened around his, grounding him even as the forest seemed to bend and shift with every step. "But we must be careful. There are forces here that do not forgive trespassers, that do not tolerate love defying its bounds." Caleb swallowed, shivering as much from the weight of her words as from the cold. "I don't care about forces or bounds. I only care about you. If this is a bridge, I will cross it with you, even into the shadows." Her lips quivered, and she leaned into him, pressing her forehead against his. "Then we are alike, Caleb. Our hearts will guide us." The mist swirled around them, curling like smoke through the skeletal trees, and the footprints pulsed faintly beneath their feet, a rhythm that seemed almost alive, a heartbeat mirrored in the snow. They emerged into a clearing where the snow had melted entirely, revealing a patch of earth soft and damp beneath a halo of moonlight. In the center, a solitary oak stretched its gnarled branches high, and beneath it, a faint glow emanated from a shallow depression in the soil. Caleb felt an inexplicable pull toward it, his chest tightening as though he were being drawn by an invisible cord. Margaret whispered his name, and he turned to her, seeing both fear and hope reflected in her eyes. "This is it," she said softly. "The place where life and death meet, where love can linger for a moment, if we dare." Caleb's hands shook as he reached out to hers. "I will dare. Always." The footprints ended at the base of the oak. Caleb knelt beside it, brushing his fingers across the earth, and felt a warmth that contradicted the chill in the air. Margaret knelt beside him, and together they traced the outline of the glow, a faint luminescence that seemed to pulse in response to their touch. It was as if the earth itself recognized their bond, offering them a fleeting sanctuary in a world that had stolen her from him once. "I don't understand," Caleb whispered, his voice low and awed. How is this possible?" Margaret's gaze softened, a mixture of sorrow and longing in her expression. "It is possible because we have loved beyond reason, beyond life itself. But it is fragile, Caleb. We have been given this moment, this night, but the world will not let it last forever. We must choose, stay here and risk being lost to it, or return and treasure what little time we are granted in the world of the living." Caleb's heart ached. Every instinct in him screamed to stay, to never leave her side, to defy mortality itself. Yet he knew the truth in her words. Love like theirs, born of death and despair, carried its own peril. "Then I choose to stay with you, if only for tonight. I will risk anything to hold you once more." Margaret smiled faintly, tears glistening on her lashes. "And I choose the same. For one last night, let us be together, free of grief, free of fear." They leaned into each other, lips meeting in a kiss that carried the weight of years, of sorrow, and of yearning. The warmth of that embrace spread through Caleb's chest, pushing back the icy grip of grief, and for a moment, time seemed to pause. The footprints beneath them pulsed, a heartbeat guiding them, binding them in a love that death itself could not sever. Yet the forest held its own judgment. A low wind stirred, and shadows twisted around them, curling like smoke and whispering in voices that were neither human nor kind. Caleb felt a shiver run down his spine, a warning that this forbidden night carried consequences beyond their understanding. But when he opened his eyes, Margaret's gaze met his, steady and unwavering, and he found courage in the warmth of her hand. "Whatever comes," she whispered, "we face it together." They rose, hands intertwined, and began to follow the footprints once more, deeper into the mist. The forest grew denser, the shadows darker, and the path ahead uncertain. And then, without warning, the footprints vanished entirely, leaving them in a hollow of silence and frost, hearts pounding, breaths visible in the cold air. Caleb looked at Margaret, fear and awe mingling in his gaze. I don't see them," he said. "The tracks, they're gone." Margaret's eyes were solemn, her lips trembling. "Then we have reached the place where love and fate meet. The choice is ours." Caleb's chest tightened with desperation. "Margaret, I cannot let you go again." She pressed a hand to his cheek, the warmth of her skin a beacon in the icy night. "Then do not go. Follow the path where it leads, even if it takes us beyond the world you know." And so Caleb did. Step by step, he followed the faint whisper of the footprints that seemed to pulse beneath the snow, into the mist and darkness, into a realm that no man had ever returned from. Margaret beside him, he felt the world dissolve around them, the trees, the snow, and even the frost of hawthorn slipping away until there was only the two of them, entwined, walking hand in hand into the unknown. When morning came, the townsfolk of Hawthorne would find the farmhouse empty, windows reflecting the pale winter sun, and the snow outside undisturbed, except for a single trail of bare, muddy footprints that led from the doorstep into the dense forest and vanished at the edge of sight. No one would ever find Caleb Whitmore again, nor Margaret, and the memory of their lives would fade like whispers in the wind. Yet, those who listened closely on silent, snowy nights swore they could hear a soft laughter echoing through the blackened oaks, a tender voice calling another's name, proof that love, though tragic, forbidden, and fleeting, had endured beyond the boundaries of life and death. Some say that if you walk the forest near Hawthorne on nights when the snow falls heavy and the wind carries secrets, you might glimpse two figures, hand in hand, following invisible footprints through the mist, forever bound together, lost to the world but never to each other. Caleb and Margaret Whitmore had become a legend, a story whispered across generations, a tale of love so deep that not even the grave could claim it, a love that haunted the cold winter nights and warmed the hearts of those who dared to believe that true love transcends even death itself. Long before the footsteps in the snow and the glow of the mysterious path, Caleb and Margaret had shared a life defined by simple joys and quiet intimacy in Hawthorne. They had met in the early spring of 1870, when Margaret, daughter of the town's blacksmith, had been sketching wildflowers by the frozen creek, her delicate hands trembling in the lingering chill of winter. Caleb, tall and strong from years tending his family's modest farmland, had approached her carefully, tipping his hat and offering a shy, earnest smile. She had looked up at him, eyes wide, cheeks flushed from the cold, and something unspoken had passed between them, a recognition, a spark of something rare and enduring. Their courtship had been marked by small gestures, Caleb bringing her bundles of firewood, Margaret leaving notes of pressed flowers on his doorstep, the townsfolk often spotting them walking together along the snow-covered roads, hands barely brushing but hearts undeniably joined. Their love had been a quiet rebellion against the harsh realities of life in Hawthorne. Winter had always been cruel in the Pennsylvania hills, and the harshness of the farm left little room for leisure. Yet Caleb had made a home that welcomed warmth, and Margaret had filled it with laughter, scenting the rooms with lavender and the aroma of baking bread. Evenings were spent huddled near the hearth, Margaret reading aloud from well-worn books while Caleb listened, his eyes never leaving her face. They had dreamed together of a life beyond the frozen hills, imagining children who would play in meadows untouched by snow, summers spent fishing in the creek, and nights under stars unblemished by smoke from chimneys. Their dreams were modest, but in them, their love had been boundless. Then illness had struck with sudden cruelty, taking Margaret from him before they had truly begun. Caleb remembered the night he had held her frail hand, tears streaming down his face, as she whispered for him not to grieve too long, for love would endure even after death. The grief had been unbearable, the days stretching endlessly like the snowfields outside his window. Every night, Caleb had dreamed of Margaret, sensing her presence in the shadows, until months later mysterious barefoot footsteps led him to her grave. Waking at 2:17 each night, he would stare at the closed door, heart pounding, only to find the snow outside silently confirming her absence. Yet, on a misty forest path, Caleb now walked beside her, memories of laughter, warmth, and intimacy blending with the impossible reality of her presence. Margaret's gaze shimmered with melancholy and joy, each glance reminding them of everything lost and regained. She murmured about the first time he had given her tulips in the snow, a memory that brought a soft, sorrowful smile to Caleb's face. Together, they moved through the forest, the shadows bending to allow their path. Despite the beauty, whispers of the wind and rustling leaves reminded them of the precariousness of their reunion. Caleb questioned if they were truly meant to be there. Margaret reassured him that, for this night, they were, though love born of grief and impossibility always carried consequences. They followed the faintly pulsing footprints deeper into the forest, passing ancient oaks that seemed to guide them, snowflakes drifting like warmth from unseen branches. Time became fluid, past and present mingling, and Caleb felt a desperate hope that, for one night, they could exist beyond grief and mortality. They reached a smaller clearing with a frozen pool, its surface reflecting Margaret's pale, beautiful face. Here, she whispered that they could remember and live, even briefly, without sorrow. Caleb expressed his longing for another lifetime with her, and Margaret acknowledged that perhaps, in another world, they could, but for now, they must cherish this moment. They held hands, warmth defying the cold, as the forest seemed to exhale around them. Yet Caleb sensed a final test ahead, a choice that might have no return. The footprints led them to the heart of the forest, enclosed by twisted, interlacing oaks. Here, the path ended, the footprints disappearing entirely. Margaret gave Caleb a choice: stay together in this in-between world or return to mortal life, knowing their shared time would fade. Caleb chose to stay, affirming that he would follow wherever the path led, as long as it led to her. Hand in hand, they stepped into the faint glow where the footprints had vanished. Time ceased. There were no years, no seasons, no grief, only the warmth of their hands, their breaths, and the closeness they had longed for across mortality. By morning, the Whitmore farmhouse appeared silent, the snow outside unbroken except for a single trail of footprints leading into the forest and disappearing. Caleb and Margaret were never seen again. Townsfolk whispered that they had vanished into the woods, claimed by spirits or walking hand in hand beyond life and death. On nights when the wind howled through blackened oaks, some claimed they could hear soft footsteps outside empty homes or Margaret's laughter carried on the breeze. Proof, perhaps, that Caleb and Margaret Whitmore walked together eternally, bound by a love death could not undo.